Welcome. I am Melissa Brandon, Director of the Startup Prize, Focus on Health, and we are here for another of our founder spotlights. And today I am thrilled to be joined by Margaret Melville. Margaret, I
Hi.
will let you say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about LasaHealth.
Well, thank you so much for having me. LasaHealth, we're an AI machine learning software to help clinicians better diagnose pelvic pain disorders.
I love that. It's amazing because, we first met several years ago. You joined us for Startup Prize class of 2022, if I'm not
You're
mistaken.
right.
Uh,
Yes.
so I'm guessing a lot has happened since then, but I'm wondering if you could kind of take us back 2 years. I mean, it's been about 2 years now, right? Uh, where was Lhasa Health? Like, where were you in your journey and kind of maybe kind of where you've been going these last couple of years?
Yeah. So back to 2022, I had just graduated from my MBA program and was at the very beginning of figuring out, exactly what our startup was going to be, what our MVP was going to be. Didn't have any product on the market yet. Didn't have had some advisors, had some early teammates, but definitely the early stages. So since then, in the past 2 years, we've done a number of accelerators with Texas Tech University, with Springboard, with Techstars, and then more recently, we've partnered with the National Science Foundation through their SBIR program. We've received grant funding from them, and then we've also been part of the Mayo Clinic Platform Accelerate program, where we've been able to train our machine learning models on Mayo Clinic's patient database. And now we're working on health system implementation, which is exciting.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. Congratulations. I mean, that's a lot that's happened. And also just thinking about where you were, like in just 2 short years, when you were finishing up your MBA, like had you intended to, like, was the idea like, I know I want to form my own business? Like, what kind of started Lhasa Health for you?
Yeah, so it started after I've been working in healthcare and innovation for a while. I had a medical device startup. I had worked in investing. I had worked at USAID and their global health team. But along that way, I had chronic pelvic pain, and I kept going to the doctor and saying, like I've pain all the time. What's going on? And kept being told that everything was fine. And by the time I finally got diagnosed, I looked back at my records and found it had been over 25 doctors I had seen, and none of them could figure out what was the cause of my pain. And so I started exploring this more and talking to doctors, talking to patients about their experiences, and really uncovering how there's just certain conditions where we lack the right diagnostic tools, where the symptoms are really non-specific. And so it's difficult to distinguish between so many different potential causes, that patients end up getting just left in this like cycle of being bounced around between specialists, bounced around between professionals. And we really saw this as an opportunity to use machine learning to take all the insights that exist on the electronic health records as kind of, all these digital clues of what it might be, to be able to flag patients who have these undiagnosed disorders.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you like say that a lot of it started off with your own personal experience. We found a lot of folks in the health sector. So often there is a very personal story around their company, whether it's something that they've dealt with or a family member or a friend or one of the co-founders. It's cool to see how all of you have like taken these pain points in our lives and really transformed it into a viable solution. You talked a lot about several things in your background prior to, getting this company off the ground. Is there anything that you feel was really instrumental or really gave you maybe um, a little inside view or maybe a little competitive edge, something that maybe other founders didn't have from your background?
I think my background in the medical device startup was really valuable. Obviously, understanding what it's like running a startup, all of that entails, and especially because the medical device space is so heavily regulated, and AI is in this middle ground where some pieces are being regulated, some pieces aren't. It really helped me understand how to how to understand the guidelines of the FDA and how we design our product in a way to have a shorter time to market, avoid some of the regulatory hurdles that I encountered in my previous startup. So I think that understanding of the regulated space has helped me a lot in this company.
I can believe that. Another thing that's a little bit different about this company, when we first met, you were on Me Health. You've changed your name to LasaHealth, and I'm sure there's a story there. But I'm also sure that isn't the only change that has happened since starting LasaHealth. I wonder if you could tell us, maybe not necessarily what some of those changes have been, but when you're confronted with maybe a new direction in your company or a new goal, or maybe just what's the word I'm looking for? Or maybe just a suggestion, right? That maybe you're not going in the right direction, or maybe you need to change course. Um, how do you determine when to really like fight for your vision and really stay the course? And when do you decide, or what kind of in your mind gives you that permission to maybe consider another avenue? Like, how do
Yeah.
you make those decisions? Sorry, that was a very convoluted way of asking.
It's a good question. I think you have to be more passionate about the problem than the product. And
Mm,
so often founders get a little bit too fixated on like, this is my product, this is a thing that I've built. But ultimately, you have to do customer discovery, listen to what the customers want, and maybe that initial vision of the product that you had isn't what people want to buy. But if you focus a lot on what's the problem you're solving for these customers, then you can adjust your product and make those pivots based on that customer discovery. And I think like the National Science Foundation, they do a really great job leading their companies through that. They've through like their iCore program or their different boot camps of just making you talk to customers. Right now we're in the national iCore program, so you have to do 100 customer discovery interviews. And yeah, at this point in the startup, I've probably talked to 1,000 customers, right? But all of that information combined, I see myself as kind of just like this like funnel. If I can just take in all this input and feedback and synthesize it in a way to make strategic decisions moving forward, that's my role as a leader. And to not take it personally if like this one feature I designed and I thought was important ends up being something the customer doesn't care about. You have to be able to scrap things.
yeah, it's hard sometimes, I would imagine, but other times it's easier to see the forest for the trees, I would guess too. Well, speaking of, you spoke about National Science Foundation and resources. Are there other resources that you found have been particularly useful for you as an entrepreneur? And that could be not just a program or an organization, but maybe podcasts that you're listening to, things that you find yourself drawn to when you need a little inspiration, or places that you go to seek help and resources.
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly, I don't listen to the startup podcasts. I feel like you can spend too much time just like overanalyzing and thinking and hearing people's opinions. And so I try to focus most of my energy on hearing the customer's opinions. And then actually just working directly with the customers. And I find that's the most productive use of my time. I think, spending too much time talking with like advisors or experts or even in accelerator programs, like you should be really strategic about how you use your time, especially in the early days. Because that's going to be your most limited resource. It's kind of this race to get to product market fit, and the best way to do that is by massive amounts of customer interviews and really understanding what you're selling to your customers and why they want to buy it.
I was gonna say, like, do you have any like pieces of advice? But I think you've nailed it right there. Like in terms of like what your big piece of advice would be for other founders is, like the customer is not necessarily king, but like you should be listening to your customers and like falling in love with the problem you're trying to solve, not necessarily the solution per se.
Yeah.
And I love that. So here's a question we ask everyone who we do a spotlight on is, how can we help? Like if folks are watching this, are there any kind of current challenges or things that you're looking, whether it's to expand or looking for partnerships? We always ask like, how can we help? Who can we help you meet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I mentioned, we're in the National Science Foundation ICOR program right now, trying to get 100 customer interviews. So, if there's anyone who works for a health system, works for a clinic, we would love to chat with you. And I think when I say customer, like healthcare, there's no single customer, right? Like we sell into health systems and clinic, but the insurance companies influence it. There's so many people within the organization, like the clinicians, the technical people, the IT team, right? Like there's so many people involved in that. And so what we kind of are doing is mapping out the whole ecosystem, right? Like what is the process? Who is involved in making the decisions? Who's involved in implementation? Who do you need to get buy-in from and approval for? And what type of like security clearance or technical clearance do you have to go through? So really trying to understand everyone in the whole ecosystem. So there's so many interviews I do that the person's like, I don't think I can add anything valuable. And we're like, no, like this is so valuable. But they're like a junior person who just, processes contracting and they don't
Mhm.
think their role is important, but it is so important to understand every single person along that pathway.
Yeah, absolutely, and it gives you such a like, it's, like, truly like a roadmap for you as well. It's like, where are all these little pain points along this process that I can help, like,
Exactly.
mitigate? So, that's awesome. Well, Margaret, we're thrilled to, like, catch up with you. It sounds like things are, like, on the up and up for, LasaHealth, and, we appreciate you spending some time with us today and wish you continued success.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I always ask if maybe we could do a little Viva la Startup Prize on our way out.
Sure.
All right. On the count of three. One, two, three. Viva la Startup Prize! Nice one. I kind of saw you fade out a little there, but it's okay, Margaret. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see y'all next time for another Startup Prize Founder Spotlight.